Quiet Dream Time, a journey into peaceful stories. Welcome to Quiet Dream Time, your peaceful escape into the world of bedtime stories. Here, we create a calm, soothing space for you to unwind after a busy day. Whether you're here to relax, de-stress, or drift off into a dream, we're here to help you find that moment of peace. Before we begin, take a deep breath and let go of any tension. For the next minute, let's center ourselves with a short relaxation meditation. Close your eyes, inhale deeply, hold for a moment, and exhale slowly. Feel your body relax with each breath, letting go of any worries. Continue to breathe slowly and deeply, letting yourself sink into the calm of the moment. You are here, safe and ready to embrace a restful, peaceful sleep. Now let's dive into today's story and let your mind drift to a world of dreams. Enjoy. The night was still, the sky adorned in a blanket of endless midnight blue, speckled with silver stars. It was the kind of night when the world seemed to hold its breath, as if the universe itself was watching in quiet awe. The train, a sleek silver serpent, moved steadily along the tracks, its rhythmic hum blending with the soft whisper of the wind outside. Inside, the warmth of the compartment was a stark contrast to the icy night beyond the windows, where a flurry of snowflakes danced in the air, settling gently on the ground below. The air felt crisp, fresh with the scent of winter, and every snowflake that touched the earth seemed to sparkle in the pale moonlight. Sitting by the window, a teenage girl gazed out into the snowy night. Her name was Sierra, though the name itself seemed almost too plain to encompass the quiet beauty that surrounded her. She was lost in thought, her eyes tracing the drifting snowflakes as they swirled in the night's breeze, disappearing into the dark distance. Sierra's hair, dark as the night itself, cascaded down her shoulders in loose waves, the tips just grazing the collar of her thick woolen sweater. The strands seemed to shimmer, caught in the soft glow of the overhead lights, and a stray lock would occasionally fall into her eyes, where it would rest like a gentle curtain over her deep brown eyes. Her gaze, though distant and thoughtful, held a quiet intensity. There was a softness to her, a fragility almost, yet beneath it lay a quiet strength, something profound, as if she were carrying the weight of 1,000 stories, none of which she had yet shared. Her skin was pale, kissed by the moonlight, as it filtered in through the frosted window, making her seem ethereal, almost otherworldly. Her lips, naturally full and pink, curved in a subtle, thoughtful expression. She wasn't the kind of beauty that struck you all at once. No, hers was the sort that grew on you the longer you looked, the more you noticed the way the soft curve of her cheekbones caught the light, how her slender fingers tapped lightly against the window, in time with the train's rhythmic rattle. Around her neck, a soft scarf in shades of deep red and burgundy was wrapped loosely, the fabric catching the faintest gleam as it rested against her sweater. It was a stark contrast to the soft, muted tones of the snowy world outside, a reminder of warmth, of life, of something vibrant amidst the stillness. As the train chugged along the tracks, the scenery unfolded like a dream outside the window. Tall, ancient trees stood like sentinels along the side of the tracks, their branches heavy with snow, a mixture of silvery white and dark shadows against the winter sky. The train's headlights cut through the darkness, casting long, sweeping beams that illuminated the swirling snowflakes, making them glisten like diamonds in the night. Sierra's reflection in the window shimmered with the movement of the train, the contrast of her gentle face and the fast-moving world outside somehow merging into one. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, the frost forming delicate patterns around her touch, a temporary mark that would vanish as soon as the train passed the next station. But for now, the mark stayed, fleeting and beautiful, just like the moment she was living. She could feel the quiet comfort of the train's gentle swaying, the sensation of being carried away, of being transported to another world. The rhythmic sound of the tracks under the wheels had a calming effect, almost like a lullaby, coaxing her into a peaceful state. The soft light of the compartment, the muffled sound of distant voices, and the soothing hum of the engine created a cocoon around her, a temporary world where she could just be. As she stared into the night, her thoughts wandered. Thoughts of home, of her family, of the journey that had brought her here, to this moment in time. Sierra had always been a dreamer, someone who saw beauty in things that others might overlook. She had a way of finding the magic in the smallest details, like the way the snow glittered under the train's headlights, or the way the stars above seemed to wink at her as if they were sharing some secret that only she could understand. The train passed a small village, its houses blanketed in snow, their chimneys puffing small clouds of smoke into the cold night air. There was something magical about the scene, something straight out of a fairy tale. Sierra's breath caught for a moment as she gazed at the glowing windows, the warm yellow light spilling out into the night. It reminded her of the stories her grandmother used to tell her, stories of magic and wonder, of people who traveled far and wide, and of journeys that led to the most unexpected places. Her fingers traced the edge of the window, a delicate movement that seemed to mimic the dance of the snowflakes outside. The train continued to glide through the night, each passing moment adding to the stillness that surrounded her. In that moment, Sierra felt a deep sense of peace. The world outside, so vast and full of mystery, seemed to be mirrored in the quiet of her soul. A soft chime echoed through the compartment, signaling the arrival at the next station. Sierra blinked, momentarily pulled from her thoughts, and straightened up in her seat. Her reflection in the window shifted, the delicate curve of her face fading as the world beyond it came into sharper focus. The train began to slow, its gentle deceleration accompanied by the soft hiss of the brakes. But as the train slowed, Sierra's heart did not. It remained still, anchored to the quiet beauty of the snowy world outside. She knew that her journey, her life, her story was just beginning. Like the train, she was moving forward, carried by the momentum of time and dreams. And just for a moment, as the train stopped at the quiet station, the world held its breath again. For Sierra was not merely a passenger on this journey, but a part of the landscape, a fleeting reflection of beauty in a snow-covered world, traveling through the night with nothing but the stars, the snow, and the quiet rhythm of the train to guide her. mountain town of Everwood had always been the kind of place where nothing much ever changed. In winter, the streets were lined with thick layers of snow, and the air was filled with a chill that seemed to seep into your bones. It was peaceful, serene even, but for Noah, it had become suffocating. At 17, Noah felt like an outsider in his own life. Since his father passed away 5 years ago, he had found it impossible to feel truly alive. The world around him seemed gray, almost frozen, just like the snow that endlessly covered the ground. One evening, after another quiet, uneventful day at school, Noah decided to take a walk through the snowy forest that bordered Everwood. There was something about the way the snow covered the world in a soft, white blanket that made it feel like he was the only person alive in the world. It was his escape, a place where he could be alone with his thoughts, away from the sympathetic looks and whispers that followed him everywhere. As he walked deeper into the woods, the snow began to fall more heavily, each flake a tiny mirror reflecting the faint light of the setting sun. He followed a narrow path he hadn't noticed before, one that twisted and turned in ways that felt unfamiliar, even though he had walked these woods 1,000 times before. The trees were heavy with snow, their branches creaking under the weight of it, casting long shadows across the ground. It wasn't long before he came upon something strange, an old cabin hidden behind a thicket of trees. It wasn't a place he recognized, and it felt like it had been abandoned for years. The cabin was small and weathered, the wooden walls covered in a layer of frost. Something about it called to him, urging him to step closer. Curiosity pulled him forward, and when he reached the door, he hesitated. The handle was cold under his fingers, but it opened easily, as if it had been waiting for him. Inside, the air was musty, but warm, and there was an odd feeling of familiarity that made him pause. It wasn't the kind of place he'd expect to find in the middle of the forest. There was something almost comforting about it. As he stepped inside, the cabin revealed itself to be a time capsule, filled with forgotten memories. Dusty furniture stood in the corners, covered with old sheets, and the wooden floors creaked beneath his feet. On the table in the center of the room were scattered letters, photographs, and trinkets, as if the place had once been home to someone who had left in a hurry. Noah sat down at the table and began to sift through the letters. Most were yellowed with age, the ink faded, but there was one that stood out. Its handwriting was crisp and clear, written with a steady hand. The letter was addressed to a person Noah didn't recognize, but what struck him most was the date. It was from the year his father was born. He read the letter aloud softly to himself, the words speaking of a man seeking peace from the past, someone who had left behind a life in the city and had come to this cabin to heal. The letter spoke of loss and regret, of decisions that could never be undone. Noah felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the man in the letter seemed to be describing his father. The cabin was no ordinary place. It was a sanctuary for those who had lost something, or perhaps had lost themselves, and it became clear that Noah's father had come here, seeking solace, just as Noah was now. As he flipped through more letters, the stories seemed to intertwine with his own. Each letter held the whispered regrets and hopes of those who had come before him, people who had faced their own personal demons in the quiet of this cabin. It was as if the snow itself held memories, and in this forgotten space, they were kept alive. Noah sat for hours, absorbing the stories and slowly coming to realize that the snow, the letters, and this cabin all held something he had been missing: peace, closure, understanding. Days passed, and Noah couldn't stop thinking about the cabin and the people whose lives it had touched. Each night he returned, until the woods had become a part of his routine. One evening, as the first snowflakes of a new storm began to fall, he found himself standing at the cabin once again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Lena, a girl from his class whom he'd seen but never spoken to, appeared at the cabin's door. She looked as surprised to find him as he was to see her. Lena was quiet, someone who seemed just as disconnected from the world as he was. There was something in her eyes, a sadness that mirrored his own, and it made Noah feel less alone. "What are you doing here?" Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena looked at the cabin, her breath visible in the cold air. "I was looking for answers. My mother, she was here too, long ago. I didn't know where else to go." She entered the cabin with him, and together they explored the place. Lena shared how her mother had once lived in the town and had disappeared years ago without a trace. As they sat together and read through the letters, they found connections, places, dates, and names that seemed to tie their families together in ways neither of them had expected. Lena's mother had once spent time in the cabin, just as Noah's father did. The more they discovered, the more they realized that the cabin had been a refuge for their families in times of hardship, a place where they could come to terms with their pasts. Through the snow, Noah and Lena began to heal. The cabin had allowed them both to confront their grief, to face the pain they had buried for so long. In the silence of the forest, surrounded by the soft whispers of the snow, they found a connection, a shared understanding of loss, but also of hope. By the time the snowstorm ended and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, Noah felt different. The weight of his father's death still lingered, but it no longer controlled him. He had uncovered the truth about his family, the connections that bound him to the past, and the power of the snow to reveal things that were hidden in the quiet corners of the world. As he left the cabin with Lena, the snow began to fall once more. But this time, Noah didn't feel alone. He knew now that the world was full of stories waiting to be discovered, and he was ready to uncover them, one step at a time.